You're listening to the uMentor Talk Show, now available on the Emoja app. I'm your host, Fatima El Sayed, and on this weekly talk show, we usually invite experts to take us through their journeys as professionals in their fields. If you have any questions for our panelists, make sure to leave them in the comment section, and we'll get to them during the show. On today's show, we welcome Dr. Farooq Bandali. Dr. Bandali is a Senior Medical Science Liaison supporting both cardiovascular and metabolism research and education. He's also the co-founder of Taqwa Media, which is an Islamic publishing and distribution company focusing on creating access to high-quality Islamic education products. In search of a balanced life, the mind, body, and soul approach, Dr. Bandali explores holistic living, and we're excited to hear from him exactly how on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by Taqwa Media. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Bandali. How are you? Sorry, I think you cut out. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on our show today. We're excited to hear about your philosophy in how to reach success.
It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, it's our pleasure. So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Nairobi, Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent most of my high school years in Kenya. And then I came to school here in the US. Specifically, I was in Texas.
Interesting. And when you were growing up, did you always know what you wanted to do, that you wanted to get into the field of pharmacy?
You know, it's a very interesting question. So the answer is no. My father is an entrepreneur. And so when I was like 13 or 14, he ventured into the pharmaceutical business. And so growing up, one of the things he had suggested to me is saying that in Kenya, the role of healthcare and specifically medications, very, very expensive. They're imported. And so you may want to consider, getting a degree in pharmacy such that you can come back and you can set up a pharmaceutical company, a manufacturing company, so that you can produce high quality medications to make it available at a relatively cheap price for the people living in Kenya.
Mm-hmm. And did that inspire you to continue within this role? What led to your move to the States to study?
Yeah, so the idea was for me to come to the US here and get a degree in pharmacy, get an MBA, and then go back. But during the sort of my third year at the University of Texas at Austin, things started changing drastically in Kenya. The political situation, the economic situation was one of the things that presented several challenges. And at the same time, whilst I was in the College of Pharmacy, as a pharmacy student, I began falling in love with patient care and the clinical aspects of things. And so I contacted my father. We were having conversations, and I said to him, given what's the dynamics in Kenya and sort of my love for the patient care aspects, I think I'm going to go down this road. And so collectively, we made that decision that really made sense for me to sort of pursue a degree as a doctor of pharmacy.
So through your experience within the pharmacy field, you've been in almost every single part of this industry, that from what I've heard from you. So can you tell us a little bit about the main areas of the industry and what you've had experience in?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So after I graduated, for 2 years, I worked at a community setting, specifically at a CVS pharmacy. And then thereafter, I sort of worked 2 years at a hospital setting where I was a clinical and a staff pharmacist, helping dispense medication largely. And then I pursued 2 years of residency training. The first year was a general residency program, just like how doctors go and do residency programs. In the second year, I specialized in what's called critical care medicine or critical care pharmacy, learning how to care for patients who are in the ICU, who tend to be the sickest of the sick patients.
Okay.
And thereafter, for 9 years, I was a clinical. I had a dual role. I was a faculty member at the College of Pharmacy at Rutgers, and I was an ICU practitioner. And now I over the last 5 years, I've transitioned over and I work in the pharmaceutical industry in research and education. So that's sort of the quick synopsis journey. So in our conversation, we were talking about the different aspects of pharmacy, and I was telling you how, in my opinion, based on everything that we know, there's upwards of 70 different kinds of disciplines in the field of pharmacy. We traditionally think of pharmacists as those that work in the community setting or the independent setting, like a CVS or an independent pharmacy. But over the last 40, 45 years or so, even 50 years, there has been sort of a paradigm shift towards patient care, and very, very much of a collaborative effort between the physician, the pharmacist, and the nurse. And so that's another aspect of pharmacy that currently exists. And then the other is, one can be an academician and work in the College of Pharmacy. And in addition, being able to work in the pharmaceutical industry, in the medical affairs, both from a research standpoint as well as from, sort of having educational conversations with experts in the field.
Something that piqued my interest is when you mentioned the work in the ICU. So what's the role of the pharmacist in an ICU?
Yeah. It's a very collaborative role with the physician and the nurse. So imagine you've got patients who are extremely sick and they need a multidisciplinary approach. And so the physician in the ICU, their role is to assess the patient head to toe and be able to understand what is the medical issue that's going on, what's the surgical issue going on. Whereas the role of the pharmacist is also similar, to be able to assess the patient, but they're assessing from a pharmaceutical perspective. And similarly, the nurse is assessing the patient from a nursing aspect, and you've got physical therapists and so on and so forth. And so pharmacists that work in the ICU, generally they will go to the hospital very early in the morning and evaluate the patient, and then meet up with the physician team and the nurses and have medical conversations about what is going on with the patient, and is there things that on that particular day we can improve, give better, provide better therapies or different therapies or changes that have happened. And so it's really a decision-making approach that happens very, very collaboratively.
And it depends from patient to patient. It's specific, correct?
It really is individualized because when assessing that patient, you have to assess it on each individual level and make sure that personalized therapy is provided.
So since then, you've moved into your role at Johnson & Johnson, and that's a medical research role. Can you tell us about the research aspect?
Sure. So in the pharmaceutical industry, scientists like myself are part of a division called medical affairs. And in the pharmaceutical industry, there are commercial aspects, and then specifically there are research aspects as well. So I'm in the medical affairs section, and our role here is to work with the experts in the field and understand the sort of the research needs for a given area. So I work in cardiovascular, and I support what's called thrombosis, or the ability for clots to form in the body, whether they form in the lungs or in the brain, or if you have cancer, for example, you're at risk for having clots. So and so the therapies that we have, you want to see, can it help in this regard? And so can we study? And so one of the roles as medical science liaisons is to liaise with the experts in the field from a research standpoint, seeing, do they have ability to have a research infrastructure at their institution, and then what's the science behind it, and are they able to do they have the right patients to be able to study? So that's sort of one aspect of the role of a medical science liaison. And it really requires in general, a D degree, an MD, a PharmD, a PhD degree, and then having the clinical knowledge, and then being able to have these conversations, to help promote scientific research. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is what's called scientific exchange. Another word for it is just education. So having these meaningful conversations with the experts in the field, whether they're physicians, pharmacists, nurses, it doesn't matter, and sort of understanding what are their challenges and how can our therapies help them to better care for patients.
Are you also a professor teaching students?
So the career trajectory that I had was after I finished my 2 years of residency. For 9 years, I was a professor at the College of Pharmacy, and I was an ICU practitioner. So 5 years ago, I transitioned fully to the pharmaceutical industry, working in the medical affairs. So I don't have a professorship role currently, but I have that for 9 years.
Okay. And within that role, what advice did you give the students within your class? Did you advise them to go directly into this field? In which areas did you suggest that they should get into? Because the field is forever changing.
Yeah, I want to sort of, we had this conversation previously as well. So yeah, the field of pharmacy has changed drastically over the last, 15, 20 years. And part of, so one of the questions that always begs is, what do pharmacists do? And we've sort of spoken about the different areas.
Yes.
The other big question is, should students who are in high school or in college look to go and join pharmacy right now? And I think the question is absolutely, but in any career decision that one needs to make sure that you're weighing you understand the dynamics of a given career and all the different strengths and challenges that are faced. So the field of pharmacy, as rewarding as it is, and there's so many different aspects to it, some of the dynamics that have happened is there have been tremendous amount, the demand, what used to be for pharmacists, 15 years ago, has shifted. There's a lot less demand now. And part of the reason why is over the last 15 to 20 years, we had approximately 60 schools of pharmacy around the country. Today, we stand upwards at 140 schools of pharmacy. And so the supply for pharmacists has been very, very high, and the demand has dropped. There's an entire paradigm shift to this. So one of the questions that gets asked is, should I go into pharmacy? And the answer is yes, but understand that these dynamics exist. And so what used to be very easy and a very easy career path and so on and so forth, it really requires a deep commitment and understanding what does one want to do in their life, what is sort of their purpose, and is someone willing to go through, given some of the challenges that exist.
And maybe that comes to the question of, if someone is the breadwinner of the family, do you recommend that they go into this career directly within? If they do go into it, which part should they go into?
Yeah, so the field of pharmacy. There's two big areas in the field of pharmacy. There is what's called a pharmacist. And within a pharmacist, you can be a community pharmacist, and you can be a clinical pharmacist, and so on and so forth. What sort of we've highlighted. The other is you can be an assistant to a pharmacist, a pharmacist technician. Yeah, and so the pharmacist technician, the amount of education that they need to do their job is not as does not take as many years, for example.
Okay.
And so, but obviously, with anything in life, if you don't have the long investment, then sort of the ultimate payout may not be as high financially, and there are many other aspects sort of rewards, but the financial aspect may not be there. Versus from a pharmacist perspective, if you understand the challenges, understand the risks, and say, I want to be a pharmacist because the opportunity is tremendous, from impacting patients or helping do research, and I'm willing to take on all those challenges, and I want to do this, for the right reasons. It's an area that certainly one should consider, very, very highly.
And now, before we go into the philosophy you used to teach your students, I wanted to ask one more question just about the application process. So how has it changed from, when you applied and currently?
Yeah. So I was just looking at, for example, the SAT requirements for the College of Pharmacy at Rutgers, and one realizes that the SAT scores for students coming out are in the 1350, 1400, right? And so it's very competitive, to get into these programs. So to be an effective pharmacy student, one needs to not only know how to, be able to study as a student, so go through a rigorous high school as well as a college curriculum, because very few schools in the US go straight into pharmacy. Pharmacy is a professional degree, just like medicine, just like law. So in general, you need at least 2 years before you get into the field of pharmacy.
During the undergrad.
During the undergrad, whereas like in medicine, you need 4 years, and in law, you need 4 years of undergrad, and then you can go in. Here, at least 2 years. But I'm of the mindset that take your time in undergrad, do the 4 years, and then consider pharmacy, because it helps with more maturity, academic maturity, personal maturity, to be able to tackle the rigor of the field of pharmacy. But I'm probably. I'm not the norm. My opinion is not of the norm. Most will do 2 years and then go into the field of pharmacy. So the application process requires having a rigorous academic program, as well as having the leadership skills, and through extracurricular programs, such that when you are studying for pharmacy, it gives you a holistic picture of what it means to be a professional, because you need, not only do you need the skills of learning how to study and take exams and do well and recall the information, but then the field of pharmacy requires communication skills and interpersonal skills, and those are usually gathered through extracurricular activities and holding leadership positions and the kind. So the application is rigorous, but again, it requires understanding. Is it something that one can commit to? Because I feel a huge sense of fulfillment, but
because you have that passion towards it as well.
So that is that, and anything in life. And Sister Fatima, I've spoken to you, and I see your passion from a journalism perspective as well. I think in life, really, bringing that energy and the passion, and it doesn't matter what aspect or to life it is, having that is crucial. And so part of as a high school student or as a college student, really exploring different activities that can help one, and getting advice and seeking out mentors, experiencing different aspects can really help with figuring out where one's passion is, and sort of
And Dr. Farooq is a great mentor. If anyone does want to reach out to him, just send us an email at the uMentor email, and we will get you in contact with him as well. Dr. Farooq, so going into a little bit deeper in this mind, body, and soul teaching that you teach your students, this goes hand in hand with Islam as well. So I wanted to bring that up. Can you tell us more about this and what this philosophy entails?
Sure. So I'll take it from a science perspective, and then I'll so one of the things so one of the things that I in my sort of teachings with students and the like, and all my research, there was this idea in the literature that was saying, cancer is a challenging, it's 400 plus different diseases. And so in order to get the cure for cancer, like around 10 or 15 kinds of cancers currently have cures, and inshallah more we'll have more cures as we go down. But right now, so a small number. And so there was this ideology or buildup from a science perspective that sort of says, in order for a patient to get the cure for cancer, what are the 3 aspects that are needed for a patient to get for cures for cancer? So one is this. I would draw a triangle and say, write in cure for cancer. And so on the left side of that triangle, it's the excellence in medical care. So great hospitals, great doctors, great research, great therapies, great support, can all help in terms of getting the cure for cancer. The other is the desire for the patient to get better and sort of the help from the family. So one of the things that has happened in the medical literature, sort of the idea around spirituality as the third arm to this. In order to get the cure from an illness perspective, you really need the excellence in care, you need the desire, and you need the spirituality. And I wish I could sort of share some of that data, some of the studies, but from a time perspective, I will not be able to do that. But so it is this entire sort of holistic manner. Okay. Over the last sort of 10 years or so, as I started seeing some of that data, and I started saying to myself, so this model of excellence and desire and spirituality can really be applied to all our aspects in our life. And so 10 years ago or so, I went for my first ziyarah trip to Imam al-Hussein, alayhi salam. And during that time, it was a huge reflection where I was asking myself a series of questions, saying, we are here in Karbala, we are in Bain al-Haramain, overlooking, and so what are the greatest treasures known to mankind? And very quickly you begin to realize that it's the hadith that was shared to us by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, of the 2 weighty things, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And you begin to realize that if these are the 2 greatest treasures known to mankind, how many are aware about these treasures on a spiritual plane? And you begin to realize that the Muslim population is like 1.5 billion, but less than even 100 million or 150 million are exposed to this idea. Yeah, and so it then led to a series of questions to say, who are the best spiritualists in the universe? And it really leads to the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And so then I started going down this road of saying, okay, so if science is telling us this, Islamically we're telling us this, how are we living our lives today? And I did my own assessment. And my own assessment was, okay, so I've gone down the road of a formalized, systematic approach to my mind, my career, right? Pharmacy and the like. I used to be an active, a competitive tennis player, and I played competitive. So I've learned how to, ensure that I eat an appropriate diet and be healthy, and sort of from a body perspective. But how many of us go down the road of having a formalized, systematic approach, methodical approach to our soul? And in reality, you begin to realize we relegate our soul to an unformalized, unstructured approach. And I think as a human race and as a community, I think we're making a mistake. We're living our lives on a physical plane, and we're ignoring the metaphysical. And why this is all important is because learning about patience and learning about compassion and respect and love and tolerance, you want to learn this from the best of the best. And the best of the best is the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. I think we really need to sort of reassess as a community. Are we approaching our soul in a formalized, structured manner? without necessarily having to be a sort of scholars per se, so that we can live more holistic living.
So this takes me to the question of when you speak about mind, body, and soul, you speak about the mind as being the work that you do, correct? Your career, and body being the activities that you do through your body in order to be healthier or whatever it is that you want to achieve. And the soul being the religious aspect. Within Islam, we have that structured approach to, you know, being practicing Muslims. So, for example, our prayer, our fasting, so does this go hand in hand? And what do you mean when you say that we aren't doing that in the way that you think it should be done within as a community?
Jazakallah. It's an excellent question. So this leads me to the well-known surah in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. By time, indeed, man is in loss, except those who believe, those who do good, those who are patient, and those who enjoy truth. When I say we're not approaching sort of our spirituality in a formalized, systematic, structured manner, we go after education, knowledge, and information from our mind and our body perspective.
Okay.
But the most important thing we can be doing in our lives, more than being a dad and a professional and a husband and a brother and so on and so forth, is going after godly knowledge. And what has happened is we have relegated our seeking of knowledge, of godly knowledge through Muharram events and Ramadan. We've compartmentalized our approach. And so in my work as a scientist, I have come across addiction in Muslim communities. I lecture on addiction, for example, right? I within for families and communities and so on and so forth, you begin to realize that the divorce rates are very, very high, for example.
Correct.
Right? And so when you begin to see the challenges that are faced from a human race, and even within our own country, even within US today, leadership-wise or across the globe, and you begin to ask the question, we're seeing so many challenges, and it feels like these are really difficult and unprecedented times. So what are some gaps that we can sort of explain as to why this might be happening, and are there solutions? In my humble opinion, I think it's the lack of godly knowledge in a formalized, structured manner, right? From godly individuals. Now, these are very, very loaded sentences, right? So godly knowledge and godly individuals. So, it's like a godly, so the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Ahlul Bayt are godly individuals. Right? So who are godly individuals today? Right? It's a conversation in and of itself. It's a huge conversation to be had. But the idea is going after godly knowledge from godly individuals. And I think we've relegated ourselves to a secular mindset. Right? And I think the secular mindset is where we continue to be challenged. And in the secular mindset, we find lots and lots of fragmentation that have existed. And so I think one way to unify is through sort of a shift in a mindset of promoting God consciousness.
So when you say secular mindset, speaking about in terms of business or work, how can you apply this mindset? Because it is, I mean, when you go into a work field, it is the secular model because we are within this Western society. So how can you make that approach and change within your mindset, within your work?
So so today, for example, I had the, you all reached out to me and said, can we have a conversation, right? So a secular mindset would be, yes, I would love to have this conversation, and I would like to do it so that I get known more, or I get notoriety, for example. Versus if I had a mindset, I'm doing this so that I'm sharing my information, my knowledge with others, and I'm having a conversation, and I'm doing this to gain God's pleasure. So it begins with the intention. But in order to have a godly intention, you have to have knowledge. So the secular mindset stems with, having an intention that's anything but godly. And there's nothing wrong with secularism. It's when it's removed from the higher power and the constant connection is where the challenge becomes.
Because it becomes selfish.
Yes.
Okay. We've come, unfortunately, to the end of our show. So, Dr. Farooq, thank you so much. But before we completely end, what is your final piece of advice for our listeners today?
So we started off by talking about career, and sort of suggestions or ideas. Is anyone that wants to go after any career, start off with asking yourself, what's my purpose? With a career, is it because of money, fame, or do I, can I have sort of a godly purpose? So that's one piece, and this is not easy. Like for an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, it's not an easy thing to think through. So it really requires finding mentors and that kind of stuff. So that's one thing. The other is, whatever you decide to do, take the time to weigh the pros and the cons. Because a lot of times we'll go to get a career because our parents say so, or our older siblings say so, and so on and so forth. Right. So take that time, and the way to take that time is through volunteering and community service and to be able to understand these different aspects, and obviously constantly ask a lot for help, but at the same time working with mentors within the community and outside the community would also be could lend to some really fruitful thinking patterns.
Thank you so much for all of your insight today and for taking us through your journey through the mind, body, and soul teaching. I'm sure that a lot of people have learned a lot. We have one question actually before we end, and the question is from Sakina Nakvi. She said, "Salams, jazakallah for the talk. After listening to your show today, if someone wants to start working on soul, what should be our first step?" And we'll end with that.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Sakina, for your question. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So, yeah, I think in today's time, we have several different platforms that can help us from a spiritual aspect. So over the last 10 years, I have joined online Islamic courses, myself, my family, my wife, and my two boys. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It's almost like 30 minutes a day, 4 hours a week, for example. And so, for example, one platform that I have been very highly engaged with, and it's a very unique platform, is called Gother Learning Circle. And you can find it online by typing gother.org. And they have almost 300 plus people around the world taking time to learn about spirituality in a very methodical, systematic manner. Another, for example, is a different platform called Islamic-literacy.org by Sheikh Ridwan Arastu. The first one is by Sheikh Muhammad Ali Shamali. The second one is by Sheikh Ridwan Arastu, Islamic-literacy.org. And there's a third, it's called Academy of Learning Islam in Toronto by Sheikh Hasnain Qasim Ali. So there are varied platforms, and these are just three that I am personally aware with, but there are others. So taking the time to walk through this can really help, and not just relegating yourself to Ramadan and Muharram.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Dr. Farooq Bandali, for all of your insight today.
Can I also just say thank you? Thank you for the Umoja platform. Not only is it through the soccer medium, which my family and I were very active with playing soccer, but also this entire outreach program, including the uMentor talk. Sister Fatima, thank you for all your time and dedication in bringing all this information to the community to be able to raise and share all this insight. So thank you to yourself and the entire board and all the members at Umoja.
Thank you so much. And it was our pleasure having you today. And I think I'm so happy that you shared your philosophy and everything with us, because it's really something that we don't really think about. So I'm glad that we got the honor of doing so.
Jazakallah, thank you so much.
You were just listening to the uMentor Talk Show. If you missed this or future shows, you can always hear the replay on the uMentor website under prior talk shows. And while you're there, you can subscribe to our iTunes podcast so you never miss another show. And also, you can subscribe to SoundCloud. Did you know that we've switched over to YouTube Live? Please tune in every week on YouTube to hear all of our future shows and some exclusive announcements. If you have any questions for our speakers, reach out to us at mentor@emojioutreach.org and we'll get feedback from our speaker for you. Make sure to tune in next week at 3 p.m. to hear from our next guest, Sara Najdi. Sara Najdi is a materials engineering student, and she has a strong interest in practical applications of solid-state chemistry that can be used to solve today's global challenges. It will be interesting to hear from her what that actually really means. Please tune in August 22nd at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube Live.